Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this tutorial on Unity game development beginner course. So um, today we are going to talk about game objects and components. In the previous tutorial we went through the Unity interface and tried to understand what each window in Unity does. Alright, so basically in this tutorial we're going to talk more about game objects and then components. So basically, what are game objects? So let me explain game object to you in layman terms. Okay, so I have paint here and I did a funny sketch over here. Okay, so now this is a sketch of a human. Okay, basically when we talk about game objects in Unity, let me head back to Unity. Game objects in Unity are simply the objects that are in your scene. So this camera here is a game object. There's the main camera, which is this one. It's a game object. There's what we call directional light. So this is the directional light here in our scene. It's also a game object. Okay. Now every game object has components. Okay. Every game object has components. So components are what actually makes up the game object. Or components, in other words, provide functionality. It provides functionality to the game object. So it is what provides the behavior of a game object, how a game object should look like, how a game object should behave in the Unity scene. So anytime you add a game object, it appears in your scene view over here, and you can also see it in your hierarchy view, the hierarchy over here, hierarchy. Down here you can see all your objects which are actually in your scene. So right now we have only two objects. That's our main camera and our directional light. So let's get to understand this further. So right here in paint, I have this funny sketch of a human being. Okay, so I'm not a very good artist, so this looks very funny. I feel like laughing right now. Okay, don't worry about my funny sketch. Let's just proceed. All right, so this is a human over here, my funny human character with a very funny big head and a crooked lips. All right, so from my sketch over here, let's take this as a Unity scene. All right, this whole thing as a Unity scene. Okay, this over here. All right, so this is our Unity scene. Let's say we have this object in our Unity scene, this particular object, this one here, the human being. Now the human being is going to be our game object. All right, because we said any scene, any object in the scene is the game object. So over here, right here, when you have a main camera is a game object, the directional light is a game object because they are in our scene view. Okay, so any object you add to your scene view is a game object. So let's say we have this human here, so this is our game object. Now what are the various features that make up this human being? Okay, now the human being has a head. Okay, this round thing here, very funny sketch. This is the head of my human being, and the head has what we call, the head becomes what, a component. Okay, now the various features that make up the game object is the component. So the various features that provide functionality, that provide the behavior of the game object, or how the game object should behave or act like in the scene, that is the component. So let's say the head provides certain characteristics to the human character over here. So that's the human game object. So the head is now a component. Okay, the head of the human being is now a component. And now component has what we call properties. These properties are used to define what values the component should take and how this component should further define the game object, the overall game object, which is the whole human being here. So now the head component will have properties like, let's say, the eye size. What is the eye size of the human being? How big is the human's eye? What is the color of the human being? The eye color of the human being, the human being's eye color. What is the width of the mat of the human being? So how wide is the person's map, the length of the map, and all that. So basically this defines various properties of the head. So the head is a component of the game object. It's providing certain functionality and certain behavior and certain characteristics to this game object. and that component, which is the head, has properties to define how the component should actually look like and what characteristics should it provide to actual the full game object. Like in turn is going to provide certain characteristics to the full game object over here. Okay, now we can also have a body component, which is this area here. It defines the whole body, okay, of this game object. So the body component will also have properties to define various parts of the body or various parts of this component. So one part is what is the hand length, the length of the hand, or the depth, the length of the leg, the waist size, the chest size. You can even have something like shoulder length, the neck size. All these are properties. Okay, that's why I put etc. So you can further break it down and get more properties to add to various components. So you can get various properties for like the head component, like hair color, because the hair will be on the head. So hair color, hairstyle, all that will be various properties that in turn add up to the head component to make the head component actually get the overall like structure and what it actually looks like. So basically, game object is like a full body. Take it like a full human body in your scene, and then the game object in turn has various components that tells what functionalities this game object has or certain characteristics of the game object. So let's jump into Unity. I hope you guys understand this. I've tried hard to break it down to the simpler terms as possible so you can get what I mean. Okay, so let's go to Unity. So I have made it. I'm going to explain it, okay, in terms of Unity 2. So right now I have the main camera, okay, selected. Okay, with my main camera selected, now this is our game object. Okay, this is the game object. Okay, just like we said over here, the full human body here, what we are seeing here is the game object. Okay, so our camera, this full camera here, is a game object. Now inside this game object we have various properties, okay, or we have various components with properties. Okay, so basically when you click on the main camera here or in the scene, okay, it gets selected. Now when you look to your far right side here, okay, this is the inspector window. So you can realize that we have something we call transform, camera, and audio listener. Now these are various components. Okay, these components provide functionality to the camera. So we have a transform component which keeps the position, rotation, and scale of the camera, okay, in the scene. So this is a component and it's providing certain characteristics like the position of the camera, where the camera is situated, what is the rotation value of the camera, and all that. So you see this transform is a component to the camera. Now we also have over here the camera component. Now the camera component behaves, or let me say, is a component that provides various properties, okay, that allows the camera to do what a basic camera does. Okay, like let's say the field of view of the camera. Okay, how wide can the camera like see? Okay, then we have the projection. Is it a perspective camera or orthographic camera? Okay, we have the background color for the camera and all that. So this over here this camera over here is the component. Okay, and when you click you can collapse it and then open it up. So this camera here is the component, and then it has different properties, like it has the clear flags properties, it has the background property, curly marks property, projection property, field of view. All these are properties that define the overall look of the camera and what the camera will do. Okay, and then this is the audio listener component. Now the audio listener component just listens to audio in your game. Take it as, for example, the audio listener is like your ear. It's waiting to hear sound in your game. Okay, it waits to hear sound. So when you have like a game where you have a character shooting, okay, or you have a car moving, now the sound of the car, that sound of the car, the humming sound, like the sparking sound, you need to have an ear in your game that can listen to that sound and then give you feedback, you the player. So the ear right now is the camera. Okay, so the camera has this audio listener component which listens to sounds and place it for you, the user, having fun and enjoying your game. So these are the components that makes up the camera. Now if you click on the directional light, okay, over here, this directional light, you can see over here the properties changes. Now it also has a transform component, so you realize that the transform component is always available on any game object. The reason being that any game object you put in your scene must have at least a position, rotation, and scale. Okay, any game object you put in your scene you should be able to like move it around and then kind of like position it somewhere in the scene. So if it doesn't have a transform component to position itself, you are going to find yourself it's not sorry if it doesn't have a transform component, how can you then position your game object? So let's make it that way. Yeah, it wouldn't be possible to position your game object. It's not going to make sense. So the transform component helps you like kind of position your game object. So every game object by default has a transform component. Now we also have the light component. Now with the light component, okay, it provides various properties for the light game object. We have something we call the type of the light. Is it a spotlight, a directional light, point light, or area light? So if I select point light, you can see the light kind of changes. It shows this sphere around the light, and I can click and drag any of these points on the sphere and kind of reduce and increase the size. So this shows like the intensity, how far the light can illuminate. So that's for a point light. So I can change it back to like directional light. Okay, directional light is like it's like the sun, how the sun behaves. So you can see it is going this way. Okay, look at how it is oriented. So the light is shining towards diagonally this way. Okay, so we have various properties that makes up the light. We have the kind of shadows the light should cast. So should the light cast soft shadows or hard shadows? All of these are properties. The intensity of the light, how bright can the light be? You can drag on these values here. So when I click on intensity and drag, I can increase and decrease the intensity. I'm just going to leave it at 1. So these are game objects. Okay, anything you see in your scene is a game object, and then when you click on that game object, you see the various components that provides functionality to the game object. Now how can we add a game object to our scene in Unity? So when you right click in the hierarchy view over here, you see a menu pop up. You can see this menu gives us a way to add different kinds of game objects. So I can go here, we can add 3D game objects, 2D game objects. So I'm going to add a 3D game object here, 3D object, and I'm going to click on cube, and voila, it adds a cube to the scene for me. All right, and this is the cube game object. Now notice the difference between the components over here as compared to having a directional light and a main camera. Okay, now with the cube, you realize that like I said, every game object has a transform component, because if it doesn't have a transform component, how can you keep reference or keep record of the position of the game object and the rotation and scale of the game object? You need to know, like, you need to have a way to kind of know the position of the game object. You can see the cube has game objects like the mesh filter, mesh renderer, the box collider. So all these are game objects that come predefined with the cube, like it's by default. Okay, now if I can disable and enable components. So look at this check mark close to the mesh render. When I take it off, you realize that the cube doesn't show the full like body. You don't really see the shaded part of the cube. Okay, the reason being that the mesh render component provides the visibility, like the shading over here for the cube. It provides the visibility of the cube, like it gives you this shading view for you to be able to like visualize or see the cube. So if you don't have the mesh render on the cube, you realize that the cube is not visible. Okay, you just see these blue lines, and these blue lines is the box collider. Okay, the box collider is the one providing this outline for the cube. So when I take the box collider, also you realize that we don't know what we have over here, but there's a light blue line. But if you take it, you realize the light can deepen. Okay, all right. So I'm going to put back my mesh render. So basically, that is game object and components. So note, first thing is, game objects are the objects in your scene view in Unity. Okay, they are also shown in the hierarchy view over here. Now every game object has what we call components, like in the right side here you can see for the cube, and we said every game object in Unity should have at least a transform component. So if you click on the directional light, it has a transform component. The main camera also has a transform component, and the cube itself also has a transform component. Okay, the reason being that you need to be able to store the position, rotation, and scale of these objects in 3D space, because you cannot just put a 3D object here and you expect it to not have a position. It doesn't make sense. Like, you need to know where it is positioned, like where it is in the actual scene. Okay, so you can see that we also have components that also define the game object. If it provides various definitions for different parts of the game objects. So the mesh render will make the cube visible. Okay, provide shading to the cube and all that. So you can realize that every game object has components that actually define what this game object does. So thank you for this tutorial. Thank you for joining me on this tutorial. In the next tutorial, I think we'll be talking about prefabs in Unity. So stay tuned for the next one.